Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and let's talk about Tyranny. Developed by Obsidian Entertainment and published by Paradox Interactive, it was released on November 10th, 2016, and is currently available on Steam and GOG.com. The list price will vary depending on edition, currently ranging from $44.99 for the Commander Edition through $79.99 for the Overlord Edition, with each edition tier coming with additional goodies. Now this review will cover my first impressions of the game and examine the technical details rather than the storyline as a whole, although I will touch on that. Because after some hours I realized I really wanted to do a proper Let's Play of this at some point. However, I did play through for over 5 hours, much longer than a certain other review I did on another game that I wanted to play, hopefully long enough to see what I believe is most of the core systems of the game, and certainly long enough to convince me whether or not it was a good buy for me at least. Hopefully, this will be enough to help you make your own decision as well. So, before I get into what Tyranny is, we need to go over what Tyranny isn't. Tyranny is not Pillars of Eternity 2. It does not take place in the same world, it has a different lore, and there are differences in the underlying system, even though it does use a very similar engine. Tyranny is not for people who can't handle at least a little moral ambiguity in their stories. What Tyranny is an isometric view, party-based, role-playing game in the style of the Infinity Engine classics and the same mold as Pillars of Eternity, another game developed by Obsidian. In fact, the engine it uses, while built on Unity, is derived from the one used for Pillars of Eternity, and many of the mechanics cross over from that game. This similarity will invite many comparisons between the two games, but I don't actually believe it's to either game's detriment. The world of Tyranny is a unique fantasy world, steeped in magic and history. Unlike many such games, the great evil has already conquered the world in the form of the overlord Kairos. The player is a fate binder in service to one of his archons, each archon being an individual of immense magical power and ability. Fate binders serve as judge, jury, and executioner, traveling with the armies of Kairos and exacting their particular brand of justice. Before you create a character, you can select from one of a few difficulty levels, all of which should be familiar to players of Pillars of Eternity, including an Iron Man challenge mode and an expert mode for those who don't need help deciding what stats to put where, and so on. Character creation is similar to other in-depth RPGs. All player characters in Tyranny are human, but you may select a gender and basic detailing, and then a history that tells you how you joined Kairos' army. This game features quite a number of choices that have more than just a cosmetic consequence, so even the initial choices here will start affecting how the game plays out. After your origin, you select a primary and secondary expertise rather than classes, and yes, you can select the same expertise twice, allowing you to effectively mix and match your starting skill levels. After a few additional cosmetic options, you can assign your attributes and your skills. Attributes are similar, but not identical to Pillars of Eternity. There's 6 of them, with might dealing with physical strength, finesse with physical and mental precision, quickness on how often a character's cooldowns refresh, vitality determining physical health and strength of personality, wits determines a character's mental acuity, and resolve their ability to endure physical and mental challenges. Skills are somewhat similar to those of Pillars of Eternity as well, with 7 weapon skills and 5 support skills, but in Tyranny, skill use gradually improves said skills over time. The final step in character creation is optional and unique to Tyranny. You can pick a quick start and skip it, or go into a conquest mode that lets you choose how your character got involved with the conquest of the tiers. Conquest mode presents a branching path and a series of events that affect both the character's skills and abilities, but also the starting relationships with the various factions in the game. In each section, you are given a few scenarios in which you must make choices, with the various consequences of those choices then playing out. You can then decide which route you take on your path through the tiers, although it's impossible to select every path, making it a rather balanced way to set things up. Once the game proper starts, players of Pillars of Eternity should feel almost at home. Graphically, Tyranny very much resembles Obsidian's prior offering, with most of the changes to the UI itself. The area maps have been moved from a separate screen to a window that functions as a combat log or a map interchangeably, depending on the context. The party window itself has been reworked, and I have to say that I'm not particularly fond of the new layout, but it is what it is, and one can get used to it fairly quickly. Individual characters still have a row of usable skills and spells, with slots for quick items. Movement and targeting designation is very similar to Pillars, and there's a menu bar allowing for quick access to the various other screens. Character inventory is very much akin to Pillars in similar games, with each character having their own sub-inventory in addition to what items they have equipped, up to 4 weapon sets depending on their talents, and a number of quick item slots that can vary depending on talents as well. There's also a stash that can be accessed and holds the miscellaneous things that the party picks up over time. The attributes screen lets you review a character's attributes, skills, and active effects, but also how far along each skill is towards an advancement. When the character levels up, this is also where attribute points may be distributed, with each character gaining 1 attribute point and 1 talent point at each level. Talents come in several categories, with the main character receiving a choice of 6 different categories: leadership, defense, power, agility, range, and magic, while additional party members may only get 2 talent categories for each one. This allows some customization of the additional party members while keeping them fairly set in their overall roles and background. Talents can have a wide variety of effects, from passive bonuses to activated abilities, to unlocking certain additional elements of the character screen. The journal is pretty robust, allowing for sorting and examination of various quests, whether completed or not, and breaking them down into primary quests and other quest types. There is a reputation window, which allows for an overview of the character's various reputations with the factions, as well as the individual NPCs they meet. Finally, there's a spell creation system, a Spire tab that replaces the Stronghold and Pillars, and a Missives tab for when NPCs have sent you letters. First, let's take a look at the combat system. I think I can best describe it as a streamlined version of the Pillars combat system, retaining the same range and area of effect diagrams, the same engagement system that prevents enemies from scooting around each other, the same per-encounter style abilities that can only be used a limited number of times, and the same vulnerability to having attacks and spells and the like interrupted. The actual attack interruption mechanics seem to have been streamlined somewhat, as has the hit point and wound system. Rather than having endurance, then hit points, which might result in a wounded state, health is simply 1 bar, and when it gets low enough, the character might be subject to wounds. Wounds reduce the maximum health a character can recover to, as well as impose a penalty to certain actions. Wounds can be recovered through certain items, through camping, through certain actions that the characters undertake, and when a character levels up. And on that note, the limited camping supplies makes its return from Pillars of Eternity, although this time it seems a little bit more generous. Basically, the mechanic puts a cap on how many times you can rest in any one expedition, since you can't simply rest and restore without the supplies on hand, and you can only carry so many at a time. There's a day and a night cycle, and passing time and dates, and in a handful of hours that I played it, there was actually a quest with a hard time limit, so even with a more generous camping supply store, there can probably be a harder limit set on certain times during the game. The exploration map has icons and interaction areas similar to Pillars of Eternity, where certain areas include lootable containers, some include icons that you can click on for more information, and certain icons indicate an interaction event, usually dependent upon a certain skill. Finally, compass roses indicate where the party can exit to the overworld map. Like Pillars, there's also a stealth and scouting mode which can allow the party to sneak up on opponents, but, taking a cue from later Pillars mechanics, there's a certain chance to uncover hidden traps and caches even without being in scouting mode. The overland map art is more stylized than in similar games, and areas are situated as hotspots upon the map that can be traveled to as they are discovered. Travel on the overland map takes time, and there's the chance to uncover scripted encounters while moving between areas. In terms of mechanics beyond the basics already described, certain systems bear special mention. The reputation system is interesting, mostly because rather than simply having a single positive or negative slider, the main character can influence factions or other characters through 2 means each. For factions, you can either gain or lose favor or wrath. Favor represents exactly what it sounds like, what you've done for a faction, how much you've furthered their goals, and so forth. Wrath, on the other hand, is what you've done to anger them. Each of these may be influenced independently. It's possible to both irritate and favor a faction in the same turn. Doing so unlocks certain tiers, which can affect interactions with their members, but also unlocks certain special abilities at certain levels. For instance, attaining level 3 in favor with the Scarlet Chorus unlocks Merciless, which gives a bonus to hit precision against targets that get below 35% health. Archons use a similar system to factions. Companions can be influenced, although they use loyalty and fear. You can inspire a companion to accompany you either through fear or loyalty, in keeping with the whole evil twist to the game. They can allow you to unlock certain abilities, similar to factions, although these abilities tend to be combo attacks that you can use with your companions in combat. Another system that bears mentioning is the spell creation system. Rather than simply adding spells to a spellbook, each member of the party has a certain number of spell slots based on their lore and their talents. As you adventure, you'll uncover various sigils that can be combined into different spell types. Core sigils define what sort of spell it is, be it life manipulation, fire, illusion, or the like, while expressions determine the target, and the target can alter the way the core takes effect. Finally, there are accents, which can modify various aspects of the spell once it's defined. Things such as extending range or duration are all accents, and those are all optional. Once a spell is created, it can be socketed into one of the spell slots of any character that meets the requisite lore skill, and the character can then use it in combat. I think it's a really nice way to do spell creation, and I'd like to see something similar in other RPGs. Finally, we have the Spire page, which lists the various mystic spires and the devices associated with each, as well as the various parts of the tiers and whether each particular area is under an edict. Edicts affect broad swaths of land and are central to the game's plot, while the spires function, apparently, like a miniature stronghold. Each one may be upgraded through various hires that provide services. So let's talk about the aesthetics. Graphically, as I said, it's very similar to the Pillars of Eternity game. Although the styling is a little bit different on the interface and the maps, the actual character models and environment art actually seem a step up from the bar set by Pillars, reminiscent of the hand-drawn maps of the old Infinity Engine games, while being properly detailed in a modern rendering engine. Now, I'm no art critic, but the harsher, more ominous landscapes present in this game seem to have been well realized by the designers and actually really stand out in this particular engine. Musically, the soundtrack is worth listening to, although I don't really know if any of the tracks stand out, at least thus far. I'd say it's at least on par with Pillars of Eternity. As for the writing and storyline, well, as I stated earlier, I didn't play but through the first 5 or so hours, basically through the first act. What I did see was quite impressive. The storyline itself is told from the eyes of somebody who starts in the service of the evil overlord, or at least at first. Having played many evil characters in tabletop role-playing and such, I found the treatment of the various factions and the characters pretty well done, actually. Even playing the honorable sort, you're going to be hit with some pretty tough decisions, and the various characters genuinely feel properly fleshed out, with their very evident flaws, ambitions, and whims. Furthermore, decisions that you make in the game feel like they have weight, although I'll clearly have to play more of the game to see if this holds up. And that is the real question here. How long does the story hold up? I've seen some indications in other reviews that you can finish the game in 20 hours or less, and that the story seems to leave off unfinished. This is of course not something that I can confirm or deny with my initial play, although it's something that you'll have to consider for yourself if you're looking to purchase this. Whether you can accept a game that is a bit shorter than an epic like Pillars will be key. Now, in terms of stability and performance, I didn't personally encounter anything game-breaking, but you have to take that with a grain of salt, since often games like this do tend to work just fine for me even when others have issues. I will say that it's based on an engine that had a lot of work put into it already, so it's been tested and tried with a prior game, and that's always a benefit. I did notice that the loading screens are a bit long, I'll grant it that. It didn't really break it for me, but the loading could stand to happen faster. I'm not sure if that's a limitation with Unity itself or the particular Pillars engine that they're using. So, what do we have here? We have a solid entry into the RPG arena that's graphically pleasing, decently written, and uses an underlying RPG system that's effectively an evolution of one that already proved equal to the task of another game. I'm not going to say that it's going to unseat any of the current best RPGs ever from their place, far from it, but it has a unique premise and approaches the whole heroic saga thing from a different starting perspective than most RPGs. I very much want to do a full Let's Play of this sometime in the future. Suffice to say, I'm pretty hooked on this. Now, is it worth the cost? For me, yeah. At least the Commander Edition. I'm not one to pay for the extra content that's included with the other versions, things like forum avatars, short stories, soundtracks, and ringtones, and the other things. If you enjoy that sort of thing, more power to you, but it just wasn't worth the money for me. Taken as it is, my main concern is the projected length of this game. For the price that they are asking, I generally prefer games with longer playtimes. On the other hand, although supposedly short, it's not like it's a full-price game that only lasts 9 hours, and the different choices, challenges, and difficulty levels may make for some replay value. So with that stuff in mind, I'll leave it at that. Links will be in the description below as always. This has been the RPG Crawler with my first impressions review of Tyranny. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you have feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content. If you want to support me in my efforts, do remember to check out my Patreon page at the link below. Until next time, take care and goodbye.